I think it's still early enough in 2022 for me to throw another wishlist vid out there. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about Hasbro Marvel Legends, specifically the animated X-Men line. So let's get into it. Let's do some wishlisting. Yes, hello, welcome. Thank you for sticking around. I'm Chris, this is Mod Extra Games and Collectibles, and this is a channel all about my life and times as an enormous man nerd who keeps filling his house with all kinds of nostalgic collectibles now that I'm a grown man and I've got money of my own to spend on plastic and cardboard nostalgic crap. And in this video, as I mentioned in the intro there, I want to talk about my wish list for the Marvel Legends animated X-Men line. It was announced at Hasbro Pulsecon last October. They showed us two figures. We'll take a quick look at those in a moment. And I was just really overjoyed to see that this was a line that they were going to do. I've only ever been a casual Marvel Legends collector, and it was only really last year that I decided I wanted to dive headfirst into kind of 90s look and feel X-Men figures, animated cartoon, you know, Jim Lee kind of stuff. But I soon discovered very quickly that to try and get figures, previous releases with those aesthetics on the secondary market was going to require the remortgaging of my house. So this line is an opportunity for me, as I'm sure it is for many of you folks out there, to get your hands on X-Men characters with the look and feel that you fell in love with when you were a youngster like I did. So let's get into it. Let's take a look at my list and let me share what my hopes and dreams are for the line ongoing. Right. The wish list in just a moment then, but a bit of small print before I begin, some caveats and addendums if you will indulge me. So at Hasbro Pulsecon last October, there were two figures announced and made available for pre-order. These were Wolverine and Jubilee. Clearly, two central figures from the animated series, ones that would feature very highly on any animated X-Men fans' wish list, but I'm not going to include them because we've obviously got some on the way. We've also seen a Mr. Sinister previewed and made available for pre-order, and there's been some Wolverine review product out there with, you know, big celebrity YouTube reviewers that has blurb on the back of the box that heavily implies there's a Jean Grey and a Storm coming down the pipeline very soon as well. So I've excluded all of those characters from my wish list. Certainly Wolverine and Jubilee and Mr. Sinister, we know they're coming. In fact, word is Wolverine is just around the corner, in fact. But I've also excluded Jean Grey and Storm from the list, even though they would probably feature highly on my wish list, as they would many of you, I'm sure. The other little bit of small print is that many of the characters I'm going to be suggesting on my wish list have had Marvel Legends releases before with Jim Lee 90s style aesthetic to them. It's just that they're on my wish list because they are so difficult to get hold of at a reasonable cost when they do come around, and also, there's some kind of improvements or changes to the figures that I think would be appropriate for them in the animated series context, and I'm going to talk about that as I go along. Right, okay, now that I've set that scene, let's get into the wish list. There's my small print. Okie dokie, let's get some wish listing done then, shall we? And the first character on my list was such an integral part of the animated series. Not main cast, but a recurring character that really evokes the timey-wimey time traveller narrative tropes that is just 90s X-Men all over it, is of course Bishop. There he is from the animated series. He appeared in a fair few episodes to my recollection, so he's definitely a character that needs to appear in the line, in my humble opinion. There has indeed been, this is a theme you'll see many times in this video, there has indeed been a previous version. He was in the Sauron Build-A-Figure wave, and honestly, they could just reuse the mould and make some minor improvements, you know, cell shade it up to make it look more animated-y, and I'd be happy, because he's on my wish list, as many of the others are going to be, because he's so difficult to get hold of at a reasonable price. I was following an auction of that very Bishop. The box had been cracked open to get the Sauron Build-A-Figure part out of it, and it went for £55 on auction, which is, you know, over double the over-the-counter cost of the figure. But everything else can stay. You need that iconic mullet, you need that double-barreled pump-action laser shotgun, the blue and the yellow and the tattooed M over his eyes, all of that can stay. I really would be very happy if they just put a Bishop in the animated X-Men line with basically a replication of the previous mould that they've had before, and I'd be a very happy chappy. Next on my list, let's talk about a villain character, because what is an animated X-Men display without some decent villains for them to face? And I can think of no one more villainous and manipulative than, of course, Mystique, a classic X-Men character. And that classic look as well, the long white dress, the red hair, the elbow-length gloves, and the yellow skull belt around her. How could you not have a Mystique in the line? And such an important character as well. Her relationship with Rogue. In the cartoon, she led the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, of course, as well. So a kind of very central leadership role in the villain community there. So Mystique is absolutely on my wish list. Now, there has been, once again, a Marvel Legends figure with that look before. This was a Walgreens exclusive back in the day, and I was doing a bit of research before sitting down to record today, and the last one I could find that sold on the secondary market was £120, which is far in excess of anything I could justify in terms of an action figure purchase. So, like with Bishop, like with many others on this list, there's something about how difficult these are to find, but I think there's room for improvement here as well. We know that articulation on the female characters is a lot better now than it was back then, so it'd be great to get a Mystique with the improved kind of articulation points that they've been putting into the female characters. I think the facial sculpt was a little bit shakier on the older version of this character, and they could do some improvements in that space there. I think the animated aesthetic could bring some improvements to its look and feel as well, although some elements I would want to maintain. She needs a good laser gun, one of those little kind of pointy pistol things that she used in the cartoon, and the interchangeable heads to acknowledge her shape-shifting powers. I'd want that to remain too. But yeah, you need a classic look Mystique. You've got to have a classic look Mystique, and bet bottom dollar, if one does get announced, I'll be putting a pre-order in for it. Next on the list, I'm swinging back around to the heroes, and this character, another recurring character from the series, just represents, like Bishop really, so much of what 90s animated series X-Men was all about. Well, not just animated series, just 90s X-Men. And this was the convoluted time travel, timey-wimey stuff. It's, of course, Cable. Now, in the cartoon, I mean, he's got a very deep lore in the comic books, which they don't fully engage with in the animated series, you know. However, all that aside, just visually he represents everything about 90s X-Men. And I used to get giddy with excitement when he turned up in the cartoon and I realised it was going to be a Cable episode. You know, the shoulder pads, the pouches, the enormous, unusual looking sort of science fiction cannon, laser cannon that he carted around. Just loved all that kind of stuff. And having one of these in the line would definitely just stand to represent a part of what it was all about to me. Now, there has been a Marvel Legends Cable before. Apologies for the repetition. I seem to remember, though, that the animated series Cable was perhaps a bit bulkier, a bit beefier, more sort of broad-shouldered and bodybuildery than the figure that they released. I've never had one in hand, though, to know how bulky it is, but certainly he had the shoulder pads and the pouches and the combat trousers and the big laser cannon. So all that stuff I would expect to remain the same and be a central part, you know, central piece of what the figure was all about. I did do a little bit of research like I've done with the others before recording this video today, and I saw some go on eBay auctions recently for around £60, which, you know, is just under 3 times the price of an over-the-counter Marvel Legends figure. So again, one of my driving motivations to have this on the wish list is to get my hands on one for a more reasonable price, get a character that I love that's very hard to get hold of. The next character on my list is such an iconic villain that at this point, even though I'm putting it on a wish list, I'm pretty certain, my confidence levels are so high that I believe this is inevitable. This is Hasbro, this is a must. No X-Men animated series shelf, I believe, would be complete without a Sabretooth. We're getting a Wolverine, we need a Sabretooth. Just think of the opportunities with this guy to photograph and set up displays and dioramas with him. I'm already picturing a Jubilee under threat from a Sabretooth, just firing off a little fireworks while Wolverine leaps in to come and stand beside her and fight beside her, you know? Now, this is a character that I've actively been trying to seek on the secondary market with very little joy, or certainly very little joy within a budget that I'm willing to spend on it. Last one I saw go on eBay was roughly around 50 quid. The one I'm looking for is he's a bit more slim. He's a bit more slender. He's got all the sort of classic bits and bats to his image. You know, he's got the sideburns sticking out the side of his mask, and the sort of white eyes, and the furry collar, and the orange and brown uniform with the stripes on the sleeve and on the thighs and stuff. But the animated series version of the character, to my recollection at least, was much bulkier, was more, again, top-heavy, like I mentioned with Cable. But they have done beefier, bulkier Sabretooths. There's one in the Age of Apocalypse wave, for example. So I think there's an opportunity to make a Sabretooth, but with just that added, more threatening, more menacing bulk to him, which would be outstanding. No, a shelf would just not be complete without a Sabretooth in the mix. And certainly photographers and diorama makers like me would have hours of opportunity and potential in a Sabretooth character. So yeah, absolutely very high on my wish list. And it's another iconic villain next on the list for me now. Another that I maintain no X-Men animated series shelf would be complete without. This guy, you know, he represents the other heart of the mutant philosophy that the cartoon explored so much and the comic book explored so much. He's the lead villain in the opening sequence, for goodness sake. It's, of course, Magneto, and I would love to see a classic look, you know, the Magneto in magenta, the classic look red and purple image Magneto with the cell shady effect to keep the shelf aesthetic cohesive, you know, and tied together really, really well. There has been classic look Magnetos before, although, God blimey, the head sculpt on that one just bends my head. And I've actually had opportunity to get hold of one quite cheap, and I decided against it because the head sculpt just really freaked me out. There have been better Magneto head sculpts in the past, and in fact there's a pretty decent classic look. I might be wrong here. Someone let me know in the comments below if my memory's failing me, but there is a pretty decent classic look Marvel Legends Magneto in a triple pack with a Quicksilver and a Scarlet Witch. But you know what? I don't want a Quicksilver or a Scarlet Witch, so release a single independent Magneto with the cell shade look, so it looks all cohesive with all the rest of the figures, but with a head sculpt that's taking on board one of the better head sculpts from a Magneto down the line. But yeah, you just can't have the range without him. Surely not. I'm actually quite surprised they went with Mr. Sinister as the kind of leading villain in the previews that went up for pre-order, and not a Magneto or a Sabretooth, to be perfectly honest. It doesn't seem to have the same rhyme or reason I would apply to it, but there you go. So I'm sure many of you will agree, we need a Magneto in the Marvel Legends animated series line. Right, well, folks, you know what? I could sit here all day long naming X-Men characters that I'd love to see an animated series version of in the Marvel Legends range. I'm sure you can too, so please do drop in the comments down below and let me know what your most desired Marvel Legends X-Men animated series figure would be. Also, while you're down there, you know, do the thing with the thing and the blah with the blah, YouTuber script, you know the routine by now. But I'm going to call it a day there. Stick around for a minute, though, because the super intelligent YouTube algorithm that knows your viewing habits better than you is about to suggest a video from my collection of videos that it believes you might enjoy. So why would you deny it? Just go with it. Go with the flow. Lean into it. Click that recommendation. All right, I'm Chris. This is Mod Extra. Thank you so very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you on another video again soon. Take it easy, folks.